author of Presidents and UFOs, which I absolutely love. I love everything ufology. I don't like, as you said in your book a couple times, or specifically about Eisenhower and meeting with extraterrestrials at Holloman Air Force Base. Your line, you described it, the idea that he went and got some dinner, then got tooth surgery, and then was whisked off to go talk to extraterrestrials, and then comes back for morning mass. That's a pill a little bit too big to swallow. Those are the ufology books I don't like. I love yours because it reminds me of Leslie Kean. It's as grounded and factual, and you end every chapter with, and this is just speculation.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what I intended.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned something to me in your email concerning the
Caretaker. The caretaker?
The caretaker, which, get that out of the way first. That was a very, I would say, troublesome report that came out that's unverified.
Yeah.
But it did make a big splash, and that was that Ronald Reagan was briefed by the CIA at Camp David, I believe, and he was briefed by this character called the caretaker. Now, when I say he was briefed, I'm saying allegedly.
Yes. He
was briefed, and I'll interject this right here. As far as ufology goes, I'm a skeptic.
Yes.
I believe, without question, with the mountain of evidence that we now have, that Roswell was in fact an extraterrestrial event.
Yeah.
But there are some other fantastic stories that float around out there, not some, a whole lot, that I'm very skeptical of. And so I think I made that clear in the book. I'm not going to deny anything, but until there's enough fact, even if it's just circumstantial, I'm going to look at it with a sort of a crossed eye, if you will.
Yeah.
But anyway, as far as the caretaker goes, he was supposed to be the one that, for the CIA, that briefed Reagan. And on the extraterrestrials, how many races there were visiting us, and so on and so forth. I'm skeptical of that. It could very well have happened, but it's, and the thing that sort of got me, and the reason I did cover it, is that it did have a Reagan-esque tone to it.
Yeah.
The interview, the way the interview was conducted, it did seem very Reagan-esque. So I don't know. So I put that in the book. But anyway, that's I just wanted to touch on that.
Sure. Yeah. For everyone listening, that's there's a video that came out a little while ago, and it's about Operation 8200, not to be confused with Unit 8200, which is the Mossad's sort of NSA equivalent, or Israel's NSA equivalent. Operation 8200 was the whole remote viewing program under the CIA, and it allegedly and it's one of those, it's almost a little too sexy, which is why I'm way too speculative of it. UFO sightings, something like the Phoenix Lights or the Hudson Valley, those are like, you can corroborate those. The remote viewing and the idea that there's 4 underground UFO bases, kind of 2001: A Space Odyssey-ish, beaming something to something. It gets a little too wild. But the thing that just triggered my mind was when I was going through your book, and it's, allegedly there's a man that's was in charge from 60 to, well, at least until Reagan, named the caretaker, who is the head of all, I guess, official UFO or ufology, extraterrestrial contact and UFO materials of the CIA. When he said caretaker, it just, more than anything, it jogged my mind, because I had just listened to that video. and it was the Joseph McMoneagle saying caretaker. And it made something link in my. So I sent you an email last night, not really thinking twice about it. But yeah, let's just get that out of the way. Your book, I would like to think that I am somewhat well read with UFOs. I would. There was a lot in there that I had not ever heard that I really appreciated, and it's right off the bat, FDR. That letter from FDR about celestial devices. That gave me goosebumps. It's for everyone listening. I don't want to pull up your book and play it on Audible because I'm afraid I'll get hit with copyright. Can you fill everyone in listening about the letter from FDR?
What was it now?
In chapter 1, there's you mention a letter from FDR, and I believe he's talking to Vannevar Bush, possibly Henry Stimson, but he's going on about these. It's right after you bring up the LA air raid, and you talk about how prior to the LA air raid, or maybe in response to it, FDR wrote a letter, and he's talking about a recovered craft prior to the LA air raid. LA air raid and this alleged craft, which I think you said Edgar Hoover said was in LA, or not, sorry, Louisiana. These are both
you're talking about the Cape Girardeau, Missouri crash.
I think so, but it has to do with the FDR letter regarding the LA air raid. The whole thing of which is the important part is it's 5 to 6 years before Roswell in 47. But it's FDR talking about, and the letter ends with, the narrator does a great job whenever he's reading as a different president or a prime minister or someone. He does the voice, he does their impression of their voice, which is fantastic. He does Nixon, Clinton, he does Churchill, but he does FDR, and he's reading it and he's talking about, I disagree with the idea that we should share this technology with our allies, the Soviet Union, and instead that we should keep this to ourselves, because the power held within this celestial device, we can go in, he says something along the lines of, we can research it fully after the war. First we need to win the war. And he even mentions that first we need to win the war and complete the atomic program. So it's not just FDR's eloquent way of, because FDR would call an A-bomb a celestial device, right? But he mentions a celestial device, and it's in response to the LA air raid. I should have come prepared. I should have printed out that letter.
I know the letter you're talking about, and when I think that was to General Marshall, I believe, that he told him at some point that when we are successful with the war effort, you will have all of the money and resources you need to, I'm paraphrasing, to go into this matter in depth, or something along that line. But I can't recall the letter, the word for word, but I think he did refer to a previous wreckage discovered in that, and if that's the case, it would have been, I think, the Cape Girardeau event of 1940, I believe it was, and the Reverend Huffman, that his granddaughter later spoke about. But anyway, the letters that we have are not official letters. I mean, as such, they're not authenticated.
Sure.
They've been worked on by Dr. Robert Wood and his son Ryan Wood. Dr. Wood was worked for McDonnell Douglas Corporation for, I think, about 40 years. And he became very involved with the extraterrestrial matter. And when he retired, he took up the position that he wanted to get all of these letters, all of these documents that had been collected and go through them to authenticate them. So Dr. Wood is the one that has all of this stuff and has gone through it and handled the forensic on them as far as authenticating them. And sometimes the only thing you can do is look for letters that came out of the 40s, say, and see if that words are used like they would have used them in the 40s.
Yeah.
Swell would be a word that was popular in the 40s. That type of thing.
Yeah.
So they carefully went through that. Of course, if they had originals, they could check the watermarks.
Yeah.
But all of the stuff was copies.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's he gives Dr. Wood gives that letter in particular a very high level of confidence.
Which is what makes my spine tingle. It's same with the Majestic 12 regarding James Jesus Angleton and Lancer, the Secret Service code name for JFK.
Right.
The thin layer chromatography they did on the red ink, and they gave it their highest rating of verification. That, again, I thought I was well read on ufology, but that letter between from MJ1 to MJ2 regarding when again I don't want to play it because I think I'll get my channel yanked if I play the audio. It's when matters in Washington are non-conductive to our advancements regarding alien craft, and we can no longer dissuade them being presidents or other Washington officials, from interfering or looking into our information, the situation should become wet. Wet, obviously, being an allusion, or not allusion, alluding to the KGB-derived term wet works, which is a euphemism for assassination.
Right.
And that was, and then, what was it? Was it November 12th, 1963? JFK. So that letter happened, that between them, saying it should become wet. After that letter, JFK, I don't remember how long, I just remember chronologically it's after that, there's a letter from JFK requesting information on UFO for both NASA, or I guess it was NACA, and the White House. And 11 days later, the situation becomes wet in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, that's...
again, speculation.
Yeah, Bob Wood gives that group of documents, memos, are called the Byrne Memo.
Yep.
And that's if that memo is accurate, if it's true, that's about as explosive a document as we have.
Yeah.
Because that would tie the government into the assassination of President Kennedy, because he was going to release to the Russians, to the Soviets, what we had on UFOs, what we knew about UFOs. And of course, the Russians were supposed to do the same in return. And Kennedy's idea was that a year or so earlier, we had gone into a condition. I don't know I can't recall the various levels of condition red or what have you for the military, because a group of what was thought to be missiles were traveling at like 18,000 miles an hour, somewhere heading toward the Arctic Circle or in that area. And we were sure that it was Soviet missiles. Well, fortunately, we found out that they weren't Soviet at all, because the Soviets, they saw the same thing.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, you're quite all right. Yeah, it's the military dropped to a lower DEFCON level because they saw this wave of what would at the time have been one of the things we were scared of in all thermonuclear war. Was one idea was the boob attack, BOOB, bolt out of the blue, just a random Tuesday at 11 in the morning, just fire 30,000 nukes, right? And it seems like that's what they're worried about. But as you were just saying, it wasn't the Soviets either.
No, they were UFOs,
Yeah.
unidentified flying objects.
That's what they were.
Now, that doesn't mean, of course, as people always identify UFOs as meaning they're extraterrestrial. That's not the case. They're just unidentified objects. So, but in any case, that's what they were. Kennedy was worried that a mistake like that could happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to have a relationship with the Soviet Union to prevent a catastrophe,
Yeah.
which, of course, it would have been.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how that occurred, and so that's the thought behind Kennedy's thinking and the reason for his assassination.
Mm-hmm.
That's speculation, but a lot of parts or pieces of the puzzle do fit together.
Yeah.
And we know that the intelligence agencies were not at all happy with what Kennedy wanted to do.
No.
Understandably.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the conspiracy theory. One conspiracy theory behind the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something Dan Carlin mentions in Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast, which is fantastic. He does one on the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he talks about how JFK was. This is I'm quoting like a quote of a quote of a quote of a quote. Dan Carlin said that JFK said he had read a book. I don't remember. It's something has the book has August in the title, but it was written after World War I, and it was between these two generals. And they're saying, how did it all happen? And they said, if only one knew. Because the entire World War I, it's painted as this thing that we kind of stumbled off this cliff in the night. And it was like once it started, it couldn't be stopped. And Kennedy, quoting that book to, I think, McNamara or possibly LeMay, or maybe even Bobby Kennedy, was, whatever comes of this crisis in 100 years, and whoever remains whatever remains of civilization, I hope that they don't look back to 63 and say, how did it all happen? And say, if only one knew. So it just goes to paint that Kennedy did have that fear of this thing sort of just stumbling into it. And what would be a greater fear than a group of objects coming at 18,000 miles over the horizon, 18,000 miles an hour over the horizon? It paints it perfectly. And
right.
Yeah, and you also noted in your book, it's back to back, right? Because Kennedy wanted to share this with the Russians, but Eisenhower was also optimistic, right? Overly optimistic about, or not overly, he was relatively to everyone else. He was more optimistic about they don't have to be our sworn enemies. They don't have to be the boogeyman, right? And it seems that to the intelligence community, and again, I know I'm word vomiting right now, but I love your book, talks about the sort of mindset of post-World War II secrecy, and you said that it was responsible to keep it quiet because the global mass consciousness was very, very fragile. 85 million dead, the whole world turned over, 2 atomic bombs, and now 2 years later, some UFOs are showing up. The presidents were like, hey, let's just, let's put it in the closet for a decade and then we'll bring it out. But it seems like it kind of took off, and what started with good intentions, we see it snubbed to Eisenhower and to John F. Kennedy. No, we're not going to share this with the Russians. No, this isn't going to be all, the land of milk and honey. This is going to stay quiet.
Yeah, well, in the early years, with Truman especially, and Truman was dead center in all of this. And I think if Majestic 12 is true, if there was or is still a Majestic 12, it's probably not called by that name, but Truman set that up. Truman was the one that set up the CIA. That was during the, pardon my mind escapes the.
It was all 47.
Yeah, which established the Air Force
Yep.
as an independent agency or independent arm of the military rather than being part of the Army. And so Truman, the presidency, had great control. In fact, I think the presidency was at the peak of control then. But as this UFO issue grew, also growing with it was greater control by outsiders and greater money. Large amounts of money became involved in the whole UFO issue. And slowly the power was taken away from the executive branch, just slowly drained off the executive branch and taken over by the intelligence community and this is a big one, and the industrial part of the country,
the military industrial complex.
Yeah, and and they have a great deal of power now. I think the industrial people carry or handle intelligence better than even our government does.
Absolutely. Private corporations, proprietary knowledge, they're way more lock and key. That stuff disappears. Yeah,
the military-industrial complex is extremely powerful now, and one reason is they've been given such high-level, top secret, above top secret information has been turned over to them, and which eliminates the government from coming under the Freedom of Information Act.
Yep.
So this is held by the like people like Bob Bigelow, Bigelow Aerospace, who's a major player in all of this. So that's what you have. You've got, anyway, going back to the point, the power was taken away from the president or the executive branch. Eisenhower saw it. And I think it's clear that when Eisenhower was talking about the influence of the military-industrial complex, that's exactly what he was referring to.
Absolutely.
Then, let's see, Kennedy came to power. We know that story, what was going to happen there. Johnson came in then to power. And I think that's really when the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex really started taking over, because this is just my opinion. I think that Johnson had a good idea of what happened to Kennedy.
Yeah.
And I think he was scared to death of the subject. Okay. He didn't want any parts of it.
Okay.
And consequently, he was willing to just tell his intelligence people, "You take it. I don't want to know anything about it." Now, that's my speculation, but it does come from some background that I think is worthy. Nixon, on the other hand, is another story. But anyway, I think Johnson was he was uncomfortable with it.
Do you remember the and just so you know, for this podcast, as I say with everyone, don't worry about staying on topic or staying on a string of thoughts. Just let it all out. There's no agenda. We had no chapters. We don't have any talking points. Just let it all fly out.
Right.
Bill Hicks, the comedian who I believe died in '93, but he had a bit on the power structure of the world, and his whole thing is about the military-industrial complex. But as you're saying this, I think you could use the same joke and just substitute Majestic 12. But he says, this is what happens when you're elected. You go do your inauguration, you come back, and then a door opens up in the Oval Office, and you go down into this deep basement room, and there's 12 guys, and they're the 12 industrialist trillionaires that got you in an office. And they're sitting around a big, long wooden table smoking cigars. And you sit down, and they don't say a word, and a projector rolls down, and they say, roll the film. And it's a view of the assassination of John F. Kennedy from an angle that is not the Zapruder film. And it looks an awful lot like it was from the grassy knoll. The projector rolls back up, and they say, any questions? And you say, no, sir, what's my agenda? But I could see that, because I could see LBJ just, I don't want it, take it, right? Because LBJ wanted the Great Society. LBJ was like, I'm going to build up all these social programs. I think he was just, take it, I don't want it. Take it and run. I do not want it, right? Let me put my name on the space program, right? Because LBJ was very huge in all of that. He took a lot of political capital in Sputnik. And, yeah, I mean, probably, again, all wild speculation. But, hey, here's money for the space race. Feel free to skim some off. Do whatever you want, right? The coffers are open.
LBJ took the path of least resistance from a political standpoint.
Yeah.
He was politically, he would do whatever was necessary to maintain his political power.
Yeah.
And I think that's clear. But as far as the UFO issue, LBJ saw one very simple thing. He had nothing to gain from it and everything to lose. So why touch on it? Just stay away from it.
Exactly. There's nothing. You're right. There's nothing to win. It was a game of Russian roulette, but you're already a billionaire. It's like, what am I betting, right? Yeah. I was gonna say and I don't know how factually correct this is, but I'm pretty sure it is. But again, all speculation. To bring it back to Eisenhower, didn't Eisenhower request for a briefing on what was going on at Groom Lake? And when he was denied, he threatened to invade the Nevada test site with the First Army?
Well, Eisenhower, Tommy, we all have to understand that as a military person and from his role as Supreme Commander for Allied Forces, he was strict. He was on security. In fact, he relieved from command one of his good friends from West Point days. That was also a general, a brigadier general, major general, whatever. He relieved him and sent him home, and reduced his rank, because he found out that this general had been in a bar, had too much to drink, and started talking about the invasion of Europe.
Yeah.
And really didn't say anything that, from what I've read, that was totally out of line. But the fact that he was talking about the invasion of Europe, as far as Eisenhower was concerned, was off limits.
Yeah.
And so he relieved him and sent him home, and I think reduced him to a colonel. So that's the point being, in the Eisenhower presidency, as it relates to UFOs, or really to anything of a classified nature, it's very difficult to find solid evidence because he was so attuned to security that he just didn't talk about things. So with Eisenhower, you have to put together a lot of pieces of the puzzle to find out what's really accurate and what isn't. Because I tried to get some documents from the Eisenhower library, and the documents I wanted had been redacted, and I couldn't get them. But that's not unusual. I did the same thing. I spent several days in the Johnson Library trying to find documents on a number of things. Primarily the Kecksburg, Pennsylvania issue, UFO issue. And so I made a FOIA request for his daily CIA briefing documents during that period of time. And of course, that was refused. But Eisenhower is difficult. And as I said, you have to, in so many cases, you just have to use your own mentality to analyze the facts as they are, and then come up with a reasonable conclusion, such as you were talking about the 1950, I can't remember if it was 54 or 53, vacation in Palm Springs, where Eisenhower was supposed to have broken a tooth eating fried chicken or something.
Yeah.
And had to be rushed to a dentist. And people say, well, that's baloney. He was taken to Muroc, which was later Edwards Air Force Base, to visit with extraterrestrials and view their craft. Well, it just didn't add up to me, and you alluded to that here the guy, after 8 p.m. that night, they said that the press never saw him again till he went to church the next morning, Sunday morning. Well, I don't find that unusual.
Yeah.
The fact that he had to be taken to a dentist, I don't know that would have been news that anybody in the administration would want to put out. His press secretary, Jim Haggerty, for instance. And if he did, I just find that unusual and hard to swallow that as President of the United States, he was not seen until after 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. He was supposed to have chipped a tooth, gone to a dentist. But then other people say he was rushed off to Muroc to visit with extraterrestrials. He did that for how many hours, came back, crawled into bed, got a couple hours sleep after talking with extraterrestrial creatures, laying next to Mamie, and then get up and go to church within a couple of hours or so. And that doesn't add up. Now, the following year, when he went bird hunting in Georgia, and he was missing for 48 hours, I think that story has some legitimacy to it. And I think that UFOs were involved in that story.
Yeah.
That makes some sense. But the previous years, that story I could be wrong. Certainly I could be wrong. but that just doesn't add up.
It gets a little too tight. But to play devil's advocate, to play devil's advocate, if anyone would do it and do it in a way that made it seem like it didn't happen, it would be Mr. Security. It would be Eisenhower, right?
That's very true.
Just to play devil's advocate. I mean, didn't they drop they dropped corpses of fallen Americans who had already died from other battle wounds. They dressed them up in German officers. No, sorry, excuse me. They took them, put them in American officers' uniforms, and then put false D-Day plans in their breast pockets and left the corpses in France so that the Germans found them and were like, oh, look at this. We got these plans. Meanwhile, Normandy was going to happen. I mean, and as you said, relieved his friend. Eisenhower, he kept the lid shut. If anyone was going to do it, it would be Eisenhower. Hey, get this. They're going to think I went to get a tooth surgery, and then they're going to think I went to Mass the next morning. Again, I'm playing devil's advocate, but if anyone would do it, it would be, right? He would throw up a smoke screen.
Well, and he did a remarkable job with it, because when you think of the amount of troops and ships and the logistics of making the D-Day invasion of Europe, of France, it's incredible that it was done by deceiving the Germans as they did, using Patton as bait, having Patton command a fictional army. That was pure brilliance. Not that Patton liked it. But it was pure brilliance, because the Germans knew that Patton was our greatest field commander without question. And they did not believe that we wouldn't use Patton in the initial invasion. And here's Patton running around with fields full of rubber tanks and what have you. And that Patton, the Germans were convinced that the main thrust was going to be Patton at the Pas-de-Calais. And Eisenhower really was in control of that, and he kept a lid on it. It's amazing how you could keep a lid on that well.
That many people.
They weren't stupid people.
No.
Although some people may say that Hitler was crazy, and that's could very well be the case. But anyway, that's Eisenhower was as far as security went, he was just about the best.
A cut above, and it is crazy to think that he kept a lid on that, yet the KGB had Klaus Fuchs inside the Manhattan Project. I mean, it goes to show how, well, then again, they were our allies, but still, it's insane that he kept a lid on it. And there's a great book by an author I'm having on, Garrett Graff, Raven Rock. It's all about the relocation arc, all the nuclear bunkers from, like, really it kind of mirrors your book. It's from FDR to Obama. It's all the nuclear bunkers. Great book, fantastic book. But
what's the name of it?
Raven Rock, RAVENROCK. I'll email it to you after this. It's absolutely amazing. I love it.
That's good.
It is very good. It's all the nuclear bunkers. It's all things that, like, you learn and you're like, how did I not know this? But there it is, all declassified. But he talks about the A-bomb, right? The Manhattan Project, and how few, and I believe you touched on this early on. You said people think the government can't keep a secret. They can, and they do keep secrets. The Manhattan Project, I think, probably the best example. Truman didn't know until, 8 days after FDR died? He didn't know about the A-bomb. When Truman was in charge of a corruption, I guess, committee, and they go into this in Raven Rock, you touched on this slightly, but they go into it more in Raven Rock, is searching, kind of sniffing out because the coffers were open during World War II, the cash was flowing. A lot of people could have been stealing. So he was going around, right? They're finding, all right, they are producing tanks, they are building P-51s, whatever. Found a lot of money going into somewhere in Tennessee, but nothing coming out. What he didn't know is that he was on the trail of part of the Manhattan Project, or what they called S1. And as he got closer and closer, I believe it was Henry Stimson. It might have been General Groves. Someone approached him and said, "Don't go into this further. You are basically barking up the tree of something that only 3 men in the world know of. One is me, and one is the president, and there's another that you don't need to know." But they were talking about the A-bomb. But the fact that they held that to 3, and Truman didn't learn about it until he was president, and Congress didn't learn about it until there was a blinding flash over a city. To me, that says that they, like you said, they can and will keep secrets. And to me, they would never be able to keep aliens under wrap or UFOs under wrap. I think they absolutely could, and they absolutely would.
Well, you touched on something that is a great interest to me, and that is that the government can keep secrets.
Yeah.
They can't keep political secrets.
Yeah.
Because you got 2 parties or more.
Yeah.
Then each one wants to get the other one.
Yeah.
So political secrets are almost impossible to keep. But military secrets are something else again, and they can be kept.
Yes.
And they are kept.
Yes.
And an interesting side point, talking about the Manhattan Project. I'm trying to think of what can I think of it? Oak Ridge, Tennessee. I just couldn't. Oak Ridge, Tennessee was making and using more than 10% of all of the power used by the rest of the United States.
Yeah.
And think about that.
Yeah.
10%. And how do you keep that secret?
Yeah, that's an example I always point to when talking about UFOs is that 10% of the power. And not only that, I had on Dwayne Hughes in July, who was a 38-year veteran of Sandia National Lab, and we talked about the Manhattan Project. And he said there were over 150, and he made a very important distinction. He said there were over 150,000 people that worked on the Manhattan Project that didn't know they were working on it. And he said you gotta pick that statement apart. It's not that they didn't know what they were working on. Let's say you work in the Air Force, I'm developing radar absorbing material, but it's compartmentalized. I have no idea what it's going on. Is it a B-2 bomber? Is it a helicopter? Whatever. That would be, I didn't know what I was working on, but I knew I was working on something. 150,000 people worked on it and didn't even know they were working on it.
Yeah. I guess they knew that they were working on something highly classified because they were in a Oak Ridge was a city in itself.
Yeah.
With schools, churches. I don't think that people were allowed to leave.
No.
That. I don't think they were allowed to leave Oak Ridge.
They weren't.
While they worked there.
They weren't.
And children, everybody, they remained in that.
They were locked
city.
In. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really amazing. But anyway, the government can keep secrets.
Richard Rhodes is Richard Rhodes, I think. It might have been Bill O'Reilly in his book Killing the Rising Sun. But they're talking about like the actual, because you have Sandia, you have Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Lawrence Livermore, and you had all the places where they were making the enriched fissile material. But out in Nevada, where the core of the scientists were, where they were a lot like the Japanese internment camps. They were in their own little town. They had a church, right? They had maternity wards. People were having babies. Actually, birth weight was really high. But they had bars. They had theaters where all the including Oppenheimer. They would all go play roles, Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet or whatever. They would go they would do these things, Macbeth. They would, because that was their entertainment. All the while, at the edges of the town were double electrified barbed wire with guard towers, and it was to keep out as well as keep in. You weren't leaving. That's insane to think about.
Well, yeah, it really is. And of course, in New Mexico at that time, it wasn't just the atomic bomb. It was our experiments with V-2 rockets and missiles.
Yep.
And a lot of other things. I don't know. I'm sure they experimented with gases out there, although that was primarily Utah. Names I have a hard time remembering names that I'm very familiar with to me. But anyway, Nevada. Oh, the test site in Nevada, which is
Groom Lake.
Not important to me. But anyway, that's where they had testing of chemical, biological weapons.
Yeah, VX gas.
And that's a scary place.
Yeah.
No question about it, which I happen to think is getting off the subject, but that is more likely to house UFO artifacts than perhaps S4, Area 51 S4, because it's 1 million acres of government property that's absolutely no one can enter. I mean, it's just as well guarded as Area 51, probably better so. But anyway, that's again is sort of something that I believe that not necessarily other people do. They rely on Area 51. I always think that it's possible that Area 51 is a good piece of disinformation that the government uses, so that they'll stay away from other places like Utah, Dugway. It's Dugway Proving.
Dugway, yep.
And Dugway is an ideal. I mean, that's remote. Not that Area 51 isn't, but that's highly guarded. I was looking forward to when I was before I retired. I was military sales manager for a company out of Chicago, and I was scheduled to go to Dugway Proving Ground because we sold to the Navy Lodge program back then. And as a matter of fact, I had an exclusive contract with the Navy Lodge program. They could do that because they were operated under non-appropriated funds. But I was scheduled to go there, and it never came about. Some others went there. I was in the area of retirement, and they had to put off the meeting. And when it was rescheduled, I was retiring, so I didn't get to go. But I was looking forward to getting on that base.
Yeah, that's where I think you said it perfectly. I think Area 51 is a perfect smokescreen, right? What better way than to keep this boogeyman out there that has everyone's eye on it? Almost kind of like Patton, right?
Yeah.
Patton the boogeyman with the big inflatable tanks. Maybe they have some inflatable UFOs out there. It's right. But it's
poor
perfect.
Patton hated that.
Yeah, he did. But yeah,
he hated that.
Oh, he was.
But
yeah.
Like they say in the movie, George, it's your own big mouth that gets you in trouble.
Yeah, I know I'm a Casanova. I know that. I'm sorry. Right? Yeah, he's yelling and yelling and yelling.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies.
Oh, it's brilliant. I love Patton. Yeah, give me 400,000 gallons. Yeah, It's, but yeah, Patton was smart. Patton said, "Just you watch." He said Eisenhower will be president. He was just you watch. You might really like that book, Killing Patton by Bill O'Reilly. It's Bill O'Reilly's ghostwriter. It's not Bill O'Reilly. Whoever his ghostwriter is fantastic. But yeah, it's one thing I was thinking is you said S4, right? Which is it's supposedly Papoose Lake where UFOs are, which is where allegedly Bob Lazar worked. Isn't that kind of weird that the Manhattan Project was S1? That's S4. Is that just coincidence? Am I looking too into it?
Yeah.
Little interesting.
There are a lot of strange things that seem to be coincidences that probably are not coincidences at all. I must admit, I'm fascinated by the intelligence community and security.
Oh, yeah.
I love doing research on the book.
Yeah.
I love going to presidential libraries and going through their documents. And I'll say one thing about presidential libraries. I was really apprehensive going to the first one because I thought if I requested information on UFOs, flying saucers, that they were going to look at me like I was a disease.
Yeah.
But it was the absolute opposite.
Really?
They bent over backwards to get me what I wanted. I mean, it was incredible. And the assistants there in the presidential libraries would come out with carts full of boxes, full of files. Now, to find the right file, that's difficult because you're talking about millions of documents.
Yeah.
But going through the files, you really could come across some very interesting things. Like I said in the book, I found a letter or letters from Donald Rumsfeld, who was Jerry Ford's chief of staff, to
Phenomena
Major Donald Kehoe on UFOs and back and forth letters. So that's not a real smoking gun, but it's an interesting fact.
Yeah.
And I think that Rumsfeld was one of the people in government that knew a great deal about the subject.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, it's that.
I digress.
Yeah, that whole. I've had on a guy before, Dale Comstock, who was in Delta Force and then worked for the CIA. But he says once you get to the upper tiers of the intelligence world, it turns into a foggy forest of mirrors.
Yeah.
I love that imagery. A foggy forest of mirrors.
It's exactly right. I believe that completely.
It just disappears. It fades. It doesn't drop. It starts to, it's not like a road that all of a sudden ends. It's a road that splits into two, that then split into dirt roads. One turns into a bridge, one turns into a tunnel, another turns into a ferry, and they all kind of break off, and it's like, where the hell is it going? And it just disappears. It's brilliant.
One of the, and we are skipping around now.
Who cares?
I don't
do whatever we want, man.
One of the funniest incidents that it's funny and it's not funny, but the Project Blue Book, they went to I'm trying to go back and recall exactly the events that led up to it, but they were involved in having an outside agency study the UFO issue and make a report back to Blue Book or to the government. And so the government sent out feelers to various universities to see if they would be willing to do it. And they were turned down by a number of universities.
Yep. Yeah.
I think Harvard, Northwestern,
USC.
Yeah. And finally, the cash-starved University of Colorado, Denver, said they would do it for $50,000, $500,000.
Yeah.
That's what they were going to pay the university to
Yeah.
do, $500,000. So Colorado said they'd do it and turned it over to Edward Condon, which ended up being the Condon report that we know now, which killed Project Blue Book.
Yep.
Because, I mean, we know from the beginning that Condon had his mind made up before he even started the thing.
It's all debunked. It's nothing.
He just thought it was baloney. He wasn't interested in it. He made fun of it.
Yeah.
Terrible man to have in charge of doing a so-called unbiased research program.
Or the perfect man, depending on who you are.
Yeah. So Condon, after 2 years of study and getting reports together by his staff of people, most of whom disagreed with him, some of which he fired because he disagreed with it, and they saw what was going on. But in any case, the report came out in 4 parts. The first 2 parts were written by Condon himself, and the last 2 parts were written by the people that worked under him, which was far less damning than what Condon wrote. And in essence, Condon said it's nothing to this, but it's baloney. Mm-hmm. It's nothing to it. The government needs to get out of it completely. It's nothing but a hole to throw money down. It's totally not worthwhile.
Yeah.
So they issued the report. The Project Blue Book is scrapped. Now, at the same time, just up the road in Colorado Springs, the Air Force Academy.
Yep.
The Air Force has a physics textbook.
Yep.
Physics, whatever.
Yeah.
It's all in my book.
Yep.
Anyway.
Chapter. What is the book? What is the chapter? Not in your book, but their book. What is chapter 33 or 36?
Chapter 33.
Yeah.
Which is unidentified flying objects.
Yeah.
And the summary of that, and anybody can look this up on the internet.
Yeah.
The summary was that the subject of UFOs is to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
We may be visited by as many as 4 different extraterrestrial races.
Yeah.
However, don't take any position. Keep an open mind, and always keep an open mind, and don't take a position on either side. Now, here, the Air Force Academy is teaching its students that there may be as many as 4 different races of extraterrestrials visiting Earth, while back in Denver, University of Colorado is collecting $500,000 by saying that it's nothing to it, but it's baloney.
Yeah.
Now, you gotta love the government and the way they operate.
Yeah.
And shortly after that became public knowledge, the book was pulled from the shelves, and that chapter was taken out of it.
Yep. Yeah, you gotta, right, was it at the, somewhere in DC, at one point there was a building where on one floor it was like cancer awareness and cancer research allocation to like the National Institutes of Health. And in the same building, and the floor above it was the department in charge of subsidies to tobacco companies. It was like U.S. government, baby, just, middle fingers, just because. But it's, granted, it's all one entity. And obviously, for everyone listening, I love this country.
Well,
but it's
government, and especially the Air Force, and don't get me wrong, I'm certainly pro-military.
Yeah.
I think the Air Force is a fantastic
Yeah.
branch of the government.
Yeah.
I really do. But I think that their handling, and not just theirs, the government in general's handling of the UFO subject has been really stupid. They've shot themselves in the leg so many times, doing so many ridiculous things that comes to mind the other famous Project Blue Book Special Report 14. Without going into a long background on that, it was commissioned by Project Blue Book commissioned the Patil Memorial Institute, a think tank in Ohio, to do a study of the UFO or flying saucer issue. This was initiated by Project Blue Book's director at that time, Captain Edward Ruppelt. And Ruppelt was behind commissioning the Patil Memorial to do this study. And by the way, as a sideline, Ruppelt was the first and really only real investigator that Blue Book had over the years.
Yeah.
He was very good. But anyway, he commissioned Patil to do this study. Okay. Patil worked on it for 2 years. 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years. And they released it to the Air Force. Very detailed study. Graphs and charts and all sorts of things. And it was 1,000 pages long. So consequently, the Air Force said they couldn't afford to print copies to distribute to news and all this, which is probably the truth. 1,000 pages and doing that would be a very costly thing. But then Secretary of the Air Force, Donald Quayles, had a press meeting, called a press meeting, and to discuss this report that had just been released. He didn't say the report was made by Patil Memorial Institute. He really made it sound like the report was the Air Force had done it themselves. Why that would be the case, I don't know, because it would carry more weight being done outside of the Air Force rather than inside. But anyway, he tells the reporter, Patil studied 3,001 cases, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that's right. 3,001 flying saucer or UFO cases. And according to the secretary, he said of those 3,001 cases studied, only 3% could not be explained as something known and something prosaic. And of the 3% that could not be explained, they had the worst supporting evidence, the least supporting evidence, and the worst, most unreliable witnesses. Now that's condensing a very long thing going into this, that goes into this report. That's terribly condensed. And anybody that wishes to do it can go online and find Project Blue Book Special Report 14, and they can read all 1,000 pages online. It's right there. Now, what came out, what we actually found out, actually Stanton Friedman found this out, which I miss a great deal. He was
rest
a
in
good
peace.
friend.
Yeah, rest in peace, Mr. Friedman, Dr. Friedman.
Yeah. No, not doctor. He he always made that clear. He said he had a master's degree in physics, but he was friends with oh shoot,
Hynek,
help me out.
McDonald, J. Allen Hynek,
the physicist,
Michio Kaku, Carl Sagan, Stanton Friedman.
Yeah, Carl Sagan.
Yeah,
he was friends. They went to University of Chicago together and studied under Enrico Fermi.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And every time they'd get together, Carl would give him the business about not getting his PhD.
Yeah.
And he said, "Look, I didn't have the kind of money you had, Carl. I had to work my way through college, and by that time." After I got my master's degree, I figured I got to go to work and pay some bills.
Gotta go get some income.
Yeah. But anyway, but Friedman was a smart guy. He was a member of Mensa.
Yeah.
Very, very bright guy. But anyway, Friedman got a copy of this Blue Book Special Report 14 and went through it. Sand loved charts and graphs and all that kind of stuff. That just loved it. And he goes through it, and what does he find? He finds that Secretary Quills has lied his rear end off. The actual number of unidentified cases that could not be identified was not 3%, but was 21.5%. As Friedman says, it's kind of hard to round off that number from 3 to 21.5. And those cases, and this is in a chart right in the report from Batil, the 21.5% had the absolute best witnesses, the most detailed background. And the witnesses were of the highest caliber and gave details that were explicit in nature.
Yeah.
So, once again, the Air Force shot itself in the foot. I mean, it's just so ridiculous when you look at how they've handled the entire UFO question.
Yeah.
That, fortunately, seems to be changing now.
Yeah.
But it's been a long, long, hard road, and we're still not there yet. But just another example of what the Air Force did in concealing the UFO issue from the public.
Yeah.
It could very well be, and I think it is, that another reason they don't want to, certainly they have not wanted to reveal what they really know about it, is because they don't want to.
Impotence.
This is highly technical stuff that we can't even understand. But they want to keep that. The government wants to keep that in their possession. They don't want to share it with anybody.
No.
Well, I can understand that. But in doing so, there have probably been crimes committed.
Absolutely.
I think, without a question, there's been crimes committed. Maybe even death involved. Well, people involved with that certainly wouldn't want it to get out.
Yeah.
Although probably they have gone and no longer here.
Yeah.
Perhaps some still are. I don't know. But they wouldn't want that to get out either. And the government wouldn't want it to get out that their people working for the federal government had committed crimes. So that's another reason to keep the lid on the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But again, we're simply speculating.
Absolutely. And it's
but I think it's reasonable speculation.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like a yeah, a qualm I always have with people that kind of shoot down UFO ufology is they say, where are you getting this? Where are you getting this? Where are you getting the information? Well, at some point, like, okay, if I'm learning PV equals nRT, where am I getting that? Well, I'm getting it from my chemistry book, right? If I'm learning this, that, or if I'm learning about the structure of the cell wall, okay, well, I'm getting that from my molecular biology book. But at a certain point, all these things, where are you getting it? It all comes from someone who at some point didn't get it from anyone. They got it from firsthand research, right? A Newton, a Lister, whatever. At a certain, where are you getting this supersonic data from? Well, at some point, Chucky Yeager gets in a plane and does it, and it's like, that, okay. But you have to go out and get it. So this whole appeal to authority, where are you getting this? Well, at a certain point, you got to get it yourself. You got to use your brain and start piecing things together. And it's not always going to be handed to you on a platter. But that's a whole nother rant, a philosophical rant, right? But it's, that being said, speculating, it seems like there are a couple primary factors. I think it's a straw man for the government says we can't handle the truth. Maybe right after World War II, right? Maybe I could see that, the fragile psyche. But I mean, it's 2020. I don't see that as they can't handle the truth, right? It's no, there probably is. What I think the real reason is one, it's impotence. Because if you're supposed to be was it not Khrushchev, Gorbachev? Our power comes from the illusion of our power comes from the perception of our power. Well, if the U.S. government is we're the biggest, baddest guys on the planet, and then you admit that UFOs are real, well, what are you really admitting? That there are physical craft that come into your airspace with impunity, whenever they want, in whatever numbers they want, come right over the White House. We'll chase Air Force One. We'll go shoot your ICBMs out of orbit. We'll go over and we'll shut down your missile silos. We can do whatever we want, whenever we want. That is, I mean, Dr. Al Romig, who was the most recent uncurrent head of Skunkworks, said that one of the things we would do is we would wait until these little like dictators were giving speeches in South America, and then we'd bring in two SR-71s and we'd cross over and do a double sonic boom just to let you know we're here and we can do whatever we want, right? So it was a propaganda piece. It would let the people know, hey, you're not in charge, we are. So if the UFOs are doing that, and I don't think that's what they're doing, but it could be perceived as we are not the big guys on the block, right? So that's one reason. We don't want to admit that you're wrong, because all of a sudden, what else are people going to start looking? Okay, maybe China looks at us and goes, maybe they're not as strong as we think they are. That's one reason. The second reason is, and I think this is completely reasonable, is it's a technology. Since the first sword, since the first bow and arrow, since the first cannon, whoever has the best tech wins. That's just across the board, right? Go and break up all the heavy water plants in Germany, all their deuterium water. Why? We get the A-bomb, we win, game over. Japanese, you're going to fight to the death, doesn't matter, we'll send in 2 bombs. You want a third? Like, we'll serve it up for you. It's who has that power, right? The Soviets get it in 49, and all of a sudden we're kept at bay. We put our missiles in Turkey, Soviets put them in Cuba, right? It's all about power. Stealth fighter, power. Hypersonics, power. Operation Paperclip, who gets the most Nazis? V2 rockets, whoever has that wins. If it's all power with super advanced technology, what is more advanced than a craft that got here from ostensibly light years away and has some power source? All the metal, right? The metal from Roswell apparently is lightweight. You can't burn it. You crumble it up. It returns. It seems to be monotomically aligned. Bob Lazar says that it's anti-gravity, which is just power that you can't even fathom. If these are true, to me, that makes absolute sense. It'd be like, what if an atomic bomb fell out of the sky in 1905 and we still didn't know how to use it, but we could see what it could do? The first thing we would do is put it in the middle of the desert and then make that the most inaccessible place in the world. Because we don't know what it does, but we'll be damned if we let anyone else find out before we know. That's what I think it is it makes so much sense that, and then to play into your theses, what would happen? Private industry would take it over, right? And then they would start locking it down. And if they somehow reverse engineer that, are they going to pick up the phone and Pentagon, hey, we figured it out? Or are they going, ooh, we're now the bee's knees. We know how to make whatever, light faster than light technology or 0 point. We know how to do this now. No, you're the big one on the block now. Now you're the best corporation. You just keep that quiet. Keep it sealed. FOIA doesn't apply to you. I know I'm going on a little bit of a rant, but I think there are some very reasonable explanations for why it would be kept secret.
Oh, I think you're right. I think, and there are several, and as you brought up, for the government to come out and admit, the military to come out and admit that there are vehicles that they don't know where they're from, they don't know who they are, and they can fly at will in our sovereign airspace, and we can't do anything about it. That's another reason to keep the lid on, because people really don't want to hear that we're defenseless against these things. And make no mistake, Tommy, and I think you know this well, the fact that they exist is now a fact.
Yes. Yes.
It's an acknowledged fact now, except for people that think the Earth is still flat.
Well,
Earth is flat.
Yeah.
The fact that they exist, the government has admitted it.
Yep. Yeah.
The film released by the Navy.
Yep. That forward-looking infrared. There it is. It's from the Pentagon.
There are marvelous things happening now.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's behind it, but I like it.
I love it.
And so, another point you were making about technology and adversaries and what have you, there was a question asked, I don't know what forum it was, but somebody asked, why will the government, the military, not sell F-22 Raptors to anyone, including our allies like Israel and
Britain,
but they'll sell them F-35?
Yeah.
And the answer was simple, but it did surprise me a bit, and it made all the sense in the world. The F-22 is a tactical weapon, they say, and I'm not sure how that works into the scheme of things. The F-35, although a newer aircraft, doesn't have what the F-22 has, and that is the F-22 is superior to any other aircraft in the skies, any other aircraft by any other maker or government.
Yep.
Meaning we control the skies.
Absolutely.
The F-22 controls the sky.
Absolutely.
If we have F-22s up,
we win.
We're the winners.
Yeah.
Period. They're not going to turn that technology over to friend or foe.
No, absolutely not.
So that's, I think, is an interesting point. I used to wonder, why are we selling all of our high tech
F-35s? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's why. It's because they're not the best.
That surprised me, and I like the answer too.
Yeah. Yeah. But it makes perfect sense, right? Because you see F-35s on British aircraft carriers. I think Australia has some. Why are we giving them away? It's because it's, they're good. They're not the best, though, right? Why don't we? Hey, does anyone else have a B-2 bomber? Nope, right? We don't give them to anybody. I think we give U-2s to South Korea so they can look at the DMZ.
Yeah.
We never gave them an SR-71, right? Certain things you just don't know. And you're right.
No, I think that the B-2 bomber probably has a technology in it that's far beyond what we know. The stealth bomber.
Yeah. I had on a former B-2 pilot, episode 161, Brigadier General Robert Spaulding. We didn't talk about that. We talked about a book he wrote about China, but he flew the B-2.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, episode 161, Brigadier General Robert. I'll send it to you after this. It's he wrote the book Stealth War. He was in Obama's National Security Council. Now he works at the Hudson Institute. But yeah, it wasn't about the B-2. I asked him about it at the end, and he said it's the most lethal weapon system ever. But yeah, let's go into that B-2 bomber.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it could be metallurgy, a lot of things. Some things that have been incorporated in the stealth bomber that are still highly classified.
Absolutely.
Did we retire the stealth bomber?
The B-2? No, the F-117 we did. The B-2 is still flying, and they're in development of the B-21 Raider, the replacement for the B-2.
B-52 still flying?
B-52 still flying. They're outfitting that. They recently said they're going to keep adding new avionics until 2050. 100 years.
I was while I was still living in Virginia. I'm in Texas now, South Texas.
Uh-huh.
But I remember heading back. My wife and I were heading back to Virginia after visiting our children here, and I stopped in Shreveport, Louisiana, to get gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the service station gassing up the car, roadside gassing up the car, and I heard this sound. I mean, it was weird, strange, loud. I thought something was going. It was on the verge of exploding. And I looked up, and here comes a B-52 flying right over my head, going for a landing at what Air Force base is that? In Shreveport. I think that's a home of the B-52. So one of them.
Okay.
Barksdale. Is it Barksdale?
I don't know enough.
I think so.
I don't know enough to speak.
That's not
on
important.
Yeah.
But that's one strange thing. It was on the approach, making a touch and go.
Yeah.
And that is one strange thing, even today, to look at that rascal flying.
That monster.
It's a hell of a vision.
Yeah. That thing is that, and the B-36, right? That is a monster as well. Yeah, the B-52s are insane. The B-2s are crazy. The B-2s look. If you ever watch like a video with them, you just see them kind of coming from a distance. They look eerie. They look. Something doesn't click in my brain when I see it. I'm like, what the hell is that? Right? It gets a little hairy.
I was playing golf with a good friend of mine back when I lived in Virginia, and he's a retired Air Force bird colonel. He flew F-111s.
Mm-hmm.
Always gave me stories about the experience flying F-111s. And we were on the golf course playing golf, and he came over and punched me on the arm and pointed up, and it was a B-2 going to I guess to Norfolk, to Langley, or somewhere, because we were right down on the Chesapeake Bay area of Virginia, and that would be the approach going into Norfolk, which has military bases all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's more, but you look at that thing, and you would think it was out of this world.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's strange. It's a weird looking machine.
It looks alien. Like it doesn't. Yeah, something doesn't. The F-117 looks odd. It just kind of looks ugly. The B-2 looks alien. It doesn't. The B-2 looks like that thing comes out of interstellar space.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it gets crazy. It's right. Do you think that the Tic Tac the Nimitz. Actually, before we get into that, do you care if I go use the restroom real quick?
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if you need to
No
go.
problem.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'll be right back. Feel free to talk, or I'll
Maybe
cut.
I'll do the same thing while you're doing it.
All right, everybody listening, fast forward 30 seconds to a minute. We'll be right back. Oh, and we are back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
So, yeah, like I said, I can keep talking. I'm in heaven right now. I'm talking to a UFO writer. Just if at any time you gotta go, you just tell me you gotta go. We can do another one. But anyway, back into it. Do you think that the Tic Tac, the 2004 USS Nimitz, do you think that was? I'm torn on that one. Whether or not that, I think it happened, right? Because you have Commander Fravor talking about it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you do.
The Tic Tac,
Yep.
the gimbal.
Yep. Go fast. Yeah. Now, do you with those? I'm 100% on that they happened. What I'm torn on with these two is that out of this world, or have we finally reverse engineered the Roswell craft, or any of them? Have we finally figured something out, and did we just make a 100-year jump in technology?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think. Boy, that's tough to go out on a limb here, but
Hey,
I think we made some tremendous strides, but I don't know that we now have anything that can accelerate from 60, 70,000 feet, whatever the thing was, down in a second or two to sea level. Certainly we haven't developed anything that can do that with a human inside of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't mean that. I mean, but imagine.
But could we develop a machine that could do that? I guess it's possible. I think it's a little bit outside of the envelope, but it's, in this subject, I don't rule anything out.
Yeah.
But I think it's unlikely that we would be doing that if it was something that was extremely secret, which this would be, in front of a bunch of witnesses, even though they were naval officers and enlisted men, if they wanted to keep it quiet. It's just like people that say all UFOs are either misidentified or they're secret government vehicles and operations. And my comment back is there's no doubt that some are. But there's also no doubt that some aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Because secret government developed platforms, aerial platforms, would not be out playing cat and mouse with a civilian airliner, as they have done.
Yeah, Alaska, JAL.
Yeah, they have done a number of times, and that just doesn't make sense. That's not going to happen. That they would be flown in airspace that's strictly prohibited, like Area 51. And my friend that I was telling you about, this bird colonel, when he was flying F-111s, excuse me, he knew, and they did a lot of desert flying out in the Southwest. But they knew they could not enter the restricted airspace around the Nevada test site.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an absolute no-no that you get yourself in big time trouble.
Yeah.
If you did it. So that would be the place that you test these aircraft.
Yeah.
I would think. Now, maybe because it was Navy ships, and maybe they had some program that they were testing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I still think the best explanation is that they are extraterrestrial of some nature.
Sure.
Whether they're manned or unmanned,
or
being occupied or being unoccupied.
Yeah.
So that's my take.
Yeah. I was gonna say at the Nevada test site. Yeah, I remember watching a documentary and they're talking about all the airspace at the Nevada test site is highly off limits. But then even for the test pilots within the Nevada test site, the Area 51 airspace, which is called the box, that is off limits to them. So they say as off limits as the Nevada test site airspace is to civilian pilots, the box is off limits to us. They say if you fly in there, you'll be grounded, wings gone, done. So that would be the place to do it. But because I want it to be true, my devil's advocate is so we've established, right? So we're talking about F-22, then we can kind of extrapolate that to, right, our aircraft carriers, our radar, the Spy 1 radar. We would argue that can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you were. So if we know that we're the best military in the world, what better way to test your new craft than to test it against the best? Because if you can beat the best, then you can beat China, Iran, Russia. So why not go take that thing over a strike group, an aircraft carrier strike group? And again, all speculation. But hey, man, why not whiz it around there? And if you can evade them, if you can have them going in circles and scratching their head, then that is, hey, it's great test data, right? Because you can go in and grab all that. It's unlike a normal test flight. There would almost be like a placebo, or there'd almost be like a double-blind, like gold standard placebo test. Go do a test that the people don't know is a test, right? It could be, again, that's just my speculation, but it's. Yeah, you're right. Why wouldn't we just keep that? Why wouldn't we keep that to ourselves and put it in Nevada? But, I mean, if you think in 1964, right? When was the first SR-71 flight? Late 60s? Mid 60s?
What was that now?
When was the first SR-71 flight? SR-71 Blackbird? 60s?
Yeah. I would think it would probably have been around 1970 something in that range, because we were flying.
We used them over Vietnam.
We were flying U-2s.
U-2s were 50s and 60s.
I can't remember when Jerry Powell was shot down.
He was shot down May 1st, 1960.
1960.
The U-2. First SR-71 flight. Let's look it up. December 22nd, 1964.
Okay.
Okay. So
Well,
yeah. My logic is go look at the other technology of 1964, right? So a year and change after JFK died. Go look at the technology of that day, right? TVs, color TVs were, I don't even know if that was a thing. TVs, those were a hot product. I mean, go look at the newest cars of the time. Go look at the phones. Go look at all of that. And then look at the SR-71. And
yeah.
look at that gap. And now imagine, well, look at what our everyday technology is now. Like, okay, what are we doing right now? We're talking over Zoom. I have a MacBook Pro in front of me with some 10 terabyte hard drives. I have an iPad right here to look up notes. If this is I have a 4K TV right here. If this is our everyday consumer goods, the B-2 and the F-22, I don't think are as relatively distant from this as the SR-71 is from 1964 technology. I think what would be equivalently mind-blowing to us would be something like a Tic Tac. That's my argument.
Well, you could be right. The Tic Tac is different from other UFO or flying saucers. I love the term flying saucers better than UFOs because if you talk about a flying saucer, you're not talking about But and the Tic Tac is really like nothing I've seen, and go back to. Not back to, but go forward from that. That was 2004, I believe.
Yes, sir.
And 2012 was the gimbal, and I think that was off Virginia, North Carolina.
Yep.
And the gimbal is more traditional UFO flying saucer. And of course, that did some miraculous things too. I don't know what the speed was that they calculated that when that thing finally took off.
Yeah.
Took away from the camera.
Yeah.
On the F-18. People say the gun camera. I don't think it wasn't a gun camera.
It was a targeting pod, forward-looking infrared.
Yeah. But anyway, when that thing took off and just shot off the screen, boom, it was gone. Again, I guess they could belong to us, but everybody says the people that are supposed to be in the know, like Hal Puthoff now and Mellon, these people say that these things are not ours.
Okay.
So, I don't know. But, they could still be in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference what your position is or how many stars you got on your shoulder.
Yeah, they don't care.
If you're not in the need to know, you're not in the need to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're not going to know.
Yeah.
Another interesting sidelight to what we were talking about, when I was doing research in the Johnson Library in Austin, I found out that Admiral Bobby Ray Inman's office was on campus there at the Johnson Library, within strolling distance. So I contacted his office, and his assistant, secretary, whatever, got back to me and said that regrettably, Admiral Inman would not have the time to meet with me. And what I asked in the letter was, I said something along the lines, "Dear Admiral, I know you're extremely busy, but I would like to discuss the issue of unidentified flying objects. I'm doing research in the Johnson Library for the next few days. And if you would grant me a few minutes, I promise you that anything you say will remain, that if you want it to remain confidential, it will. And I am not asking you to divulge any classified information in any way. I wouldn't do that. But anyway, I made it clear that I was on the up and up. Unfortunately, Inman had a year or two or sometime prior had been on the phone with an investigator. Mm-hmm. And an investigator secretly taped the discussion. And then put it out for public hearing. And Inman was really burned by that because he said some things that would indicate that he was supporting the existence of extraterrestrials.
Sure.
He backpedaled after this came out and saying what he was referring to was a submarine or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it was clear that was not the case. So I think that burned him from giving anybody interviews. I don't know if he would have given me one anyway, but it's and I think that the Admiral knew as much about the UFO issue as anybody. I would think that he would have been part of Majestic 12 or whatever they may be called now. Mm-hmm. Maybe a lot more than just 12 involved.
Yeah.
But anyway, just a bit of a sidelight. He didn't want anything to do with me, so.
I was going to ask, so are you going to release I guess an updated version of your book for the Trump presidency as well as more importantly the Tic Tac and the acknowledgement of the Pentagon late last year as well as this year that it is indeed not ours? I think you need to update the book, man.
I've given some thought to it. I don't know. I'm certainly not ruling it out. And it sort of depends on my agent and publisher. So you would just have to see what they if they encourage me to do it. I know when the publisher bought the book, they bought it. St. Martin's bought it based on the outline that I had given them for a book, and paid quite well for it. Mm-hmm. Then, when I signed the contract, I had to go and write the book.
Yeah,
So that sort of put a monkey on my back. But I am fortunate to have a top-notch agent and the publisher worked with me very, very well. I'm grateful to St. Martin's and Mark Resnick, the executive editor at St. Martin's. It just did a wonderful job for me. But anyway, where were we?
Who knows?
Easy to get off the subject.
Who cares, man? UFOs. It's I got in touch with Dr. Lynn Katai. I got in touch with her yesterday. Yeah, she's going to. We're gonna talk in February. She's super booked up, but we're gonna talk in February about when we get closer to the 24th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights. We're gonna talk because to me that one, the Phoenix Lights, to me is. Well, I don't know, maybe now with the Tic Tac. To me, that's one of the more... You can't really look away from it, right? You can't just Oh, it's military flares. No, it wasn't. Shut up. Right? It's Fife Symington, who was in the Air Force, right, and he was the governor at the time, and he later said, he goes, I don't think it was of this world, right? They say it was a mile wide, going slowly over the city, and thousands of people called in and said it, and I think one guy was looking at it, and he was told by a friend, "You saw the B-2 bomber. You're describing the shape of the B-2 bomber." And he said, "No, you could land a fleet of B-2 bombers on the wings of this."
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. What was the movie I Know What I Saw? That's a great one.
Yeah.
I think Jamie Foxx. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a new one out I haven't seen yet.
It's called Phenomena. I bought it on YouTube like 2 weeks ago. I have it, and I haven't started it yet because when I sit down, I want to sit down and enjoy it. I don't want to rush it.
I don't think the price is prohibitive. It's not like $5 or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's awesome. I have it. I've been working on this podcast 24/7. I haven't had time to sit down and watch it yet.
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and get it and watch it.
Yeah,
especially since I'm apartment bound now.
Yeah, well, as we all are.
We are. Of course, I'm retired, but I'm stuck up in this apartment, except when I go when my son, daughter-in-law, and 10 grandchildren.
Yeah.
Live about 15 minutes away from me here in New Braunfels. And I go there and have dinner with them about once a week.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's all the going out I do, except to go to the supermarket, and then I just back into the curbside pickup, and they come out and load the car with the stuff I ordered online.
Yeah.
I'm just at my age, I don't want to get this stuff. So.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, it's
sure changed life.
Yeah.
Do you? I had something that came to mind. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Phoenix Lights, but yeah, it seems like if there's ever been a year for UFO disclosure, it seems like 2020 is it. Right? If there's ever been a time for something crazy, it feels like this is it.
Well, there's something going on. I mean, why would the government have allowed the Navy to put out those film strips?
Yeah.
And let's talk about the Navy for a minute.
Sure.
The Navy in the whole UFO question has been purely mum on it. They don't talk about it. They don't acknowledge it. They never have. But I know that they are involved in it. I know that when I lived in Virginia, which was on the Chesapeake Bay, it was about 25 miles as the bird flies from where I lived on the bay to Patuxent Naval Air Station, which is the Navy's chief test flight center. And I've been on that base when I was selling to the military. And they had a building that was enclosed in double rows of wire, barbed wire, or wire fence, and it was what's that stuff that they have on top of these things? I can't remember the term that they use.
I have no idea.
Stuff that'll tear your backside up real quick.
Okay, all right, barbed wire?
No, it's not barbed wire. It's a lot worse than barbed wire.
Razor wire?
Concertina wire.
Yeah.
But anyway, and I was told that how accurate this is, but I was told by the civilian that I was working with that building was all devoted to all UFO research.
Oh shit.
And it's I think the Navy has been more involved in it than even the Air Force. But boy, they good at keeping stuff quiet.
Yeah.
But the Navy's had a lot of encounters with these things.
Yeah.
Over the years.
Yeah.
Since the Second World War.
Yeah.
Seeing the things come out of the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you watch the Bob Lazar interview on Joe Rogan?
Yes.
Yeah. He talks about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. Bob Lazar is an interesting case. When he first came out, and I found out that all of his college background was apparently not true, and then I just wrote him off. But as the years have gone by, he's become more and more of a real player to me than he was, and that his story may be completely true, where I didn't think so. My opinion, my position was, how can you believe someone that lies about their education?
Yeah.
Well, Lazar is obviously a very bright man. Very, very bright man.
Yeah.
Did he lie about it? It certainly seems like he did. There again, Stanton Friedman did a whole lot of digging into his background, even his high school records, and found out that he graduated near the bottom of his high school class, and he went to a community college. Well, obviously, somebody that has degrees from MIT and Caltech wouldn't go to a community college. So where the truth lies there, I don't know. But he very well could be. He's so bright. He very well could be self-taught.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And maybe he's right. Maybe his college education was erased from the various universities that he said he went to. I find that harder to believe, but like I've said several times in this subject, you don't discredit anything, but you keep a skeptical mind. Yeah. But he's become, I'm more willing to accept that he's basically on the level that I don't think he's a fraud.
No,
so
neither do I.
That's my take on Lazar.
I could very well see him having lied about his colleges, but I don't look at that as some like nefarious UFO cover up. I look at that as maybe that was just a dude lying to get a job, I mean, how many of my friends from college lied about some internship they did, pad their resume? I'm not saying it's right. I'm not willing to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because he does seem too wildly intelligent. And three more things. One, episode 11 of this podcast back in January, Ken Mason, who is a protege under the rocket pioneer Bob Truax, who worked for the Navy. I had Ken Mason on. Ken is in his 60s now. Ken is friends with Bob Lazar. I didn't know that until like halfway through the episode. And he starts to talk. Yeah, they used to go shoot off rockets in the desert. And he's like, oh yeah, no, Bob's the smartest guy I know. Okay, so that's a weird one. Ken is also friends with Tom Moeller of SpaceX, so he's an intelligent guy. 2, didn't they find Bob Lazar's name, Jeremy Corbell, didn't he find Bob Lazar's name in a phone book from Los Alamos? Everything else...
I know that Stanton Friedman did.
Yeah.
He found his name in there, but he worked for a contractor called...
EG&G?
Something Clark something. But anyway, that's not important. But he worked for a subcontractor. He didn't work directly for the government, which in itself is not unusual. I think that's probably what most of the employees out there work for contractors. Rather than the federal government.
He said he worked for EG&G, right? I can never remember what it stands for. Edgar, was it Germishausen and Greer? I can never remember it. But they were the guys. What? EG&G. What are you asking? What EG&G was?
Something Clark. Not Clark.
I don't know. It's but he said he worked for EG&G. EG&G is also the company that was headed up with all of the super slow motion videography of the Trinity test and the subsequent first A-bomb tests. So they were given the highest clearance because they managed to make a camera that did like 1 million frames a second in 1945. So I mean, go back to Manhattan Project, if EG&G was given that clearance, say, hey, and they specifically, Annie Jacobson talks about this. He said EG&G was specifically given kind of a monopoly on that because they wanted it to be with only one company because they didn't want it leaking out. And apparently EG&G had they were the most. They had it. They had all all the cracks sealed. They had their company, run like a military base, and so that's why they were given, I guess, freedom to do all the photography of the A-bomb, which is just insanely classified. Maybe it makes, again, speculation, maybe it makes a little sense that EG&G would have something to do with crash retrievals. But the third thing I want to bring up was Commander Fravor, who was also on Joe Rogan. Commander Fravor, he talks about meeting with Bob Lazar when he was on the Lex Friedman podcast. He talks about when he and Bob talked. He said he completely believes Bob. And this is the fighter pilot that chased the Tic Tac. He goes, I believe Bob. He goes, Bob is wildly intelligent. I think he's telling the truth. So it's like, if I'm going to believe Fravor, then I have to take his word on his judgment of Lazar,
I saw that also somewhere, read it somewhere, saw it somewhere, that Fravor did say that. And that's what sort of shoved me over the fence into believability.
Me too.
That Fravor said that. I also have a friend, acquaintance, movie maker, documentary maker that lives in Palm Springs, and he was making a documentary on UFOs, a couple of different ones, I think. In any case, he tells me that he was at a dinner with Stan Friedman and Bob Lazar.
Okay.
And he said that he believes Lazar is on the level.
Yeah.
After listening to it. Now, he didn't convince Stan, apparently, because Stan went to his grave still hating Lazar, but...
which is good. I think it's good to always stay skeptical, which is,
Well, you got to be a skeptic. If you believe everything,
you're done.
You're in big time trouble.
Yeah.
You've got to be a skeptic and really look at things closely and analyze them.
Yeah.
I had a friend, of course, this is in the book also. I had a friend that was older than me by about 15 years, I guess. And at that time, I lived in a little village, suburb of Richmond, Virginia, Sandston. And this friend, I met him when he came and opened up a newly built Sunoco service station. And I was enamored with cars at the time, along with UFOs. And so this guy was a really likable guy. He was a big guy, but 6'3", 6'4", built like a brick, what house.
Brick shit house.
Yeah. And he had been a judo instructor
Oh yeah.
in the Air Force. And his name was Doug Locke. And so he would tell me about his experiences instructing pilots in judo, and how he came about, how it happened. He went into the Air Force, and he had worked on a tobacco farm. His family owned a tobacco farm. He had worked on a tobacco farm. I don't know if you know anything about raising tobacco, but it's tough work. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
Back-breaking work. And he was solid as a rock. Anyway, he goes into the Air Force, and in basic training, you always got some smart alecks. And Doug had a Southside Virginia drawl.
Yeah.
I guess, people accuse me of the way I talk. Some people think I'm from Canada, but I'm talking like everybody in Central Virginia. Anyway, Doug had a little problem because he wasn't quick-tempered, but when people kept nagging at him, he didn't think too kindly of it, and he'd take action. And there were a few guys in his unit that had broken jaws because they had made fun of the way he talked.
Yeah.
And so this order came down from Curtis LeMay through his adjutant, I think General Thomas Powell, to various Air Force bases, that they needed 24 men to go to Japan to be trained by this famous Japanese judo instructor. And his commanding officer called him in. He said, "Locke, I got a job for you. I think you'll like. I think you'll fit into it very naturally."
Yeah.
And he told him he wanted him to volunteer to go to Japan and be instructed in judo.
Yeah.
Well, he liked the idea.
Yeah.
And he did. And he came back as a black belt in judo. Now, built on the fact that this guy was strong as an ox to begin with, and
Yeah.
he's a judo instructor.
Yeah.
But anyway, cut this long story short.
Good.
I had read, and I think I was a junior in high school at the time, 1960, I guess it was. And I had read a couple of Donald Kehoe's books, Flying Saucers Are Real, Flying Saucers from Outer Space, whichever. And I was fascinated with the subject. And reading Kehoe's books are what really got me turned on to the subject at 17 years old. So I was a little leery to bring it up with Doug because I was sure that he'd say, "Oh, you stupid kid, you believe in that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
It's nothing to it." So I finally steeled myself and told him I'd read this book about flying saucers and a little bit about it. And he stopped me and he said, "Larry, it's all real." And I did a double take. "What do you mean, Doug?" He said, "When I was teaching judo, I was stationed in El Paso at Biggs Air Force Base. And he said, I instructed students from Biggs and surrounding air bases. And one of the prominent bases that came here was Roswell Army Airfield. I forget what the official name of it was, but anyway, Roswell Army Airfield." And he said, "But the pilots from Roswell and other bases would tell me about being in the sky with these disc-shaped objects. And it just scared the hell out of them because they knew they couldn't do anything to these things acted like nothing they'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
And they knew that if they wanted to do away with them, they could do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So, and he said, Larry, these were brave guys.
Yeah.
Some of them had actually flown in the Second World War.
Yeah.
But he said most of them were Korean War pilots, brave guys. But he said what they saw obviously just scared the hell out of them.
Yeah.
So that I wrote that in the book, and that's what really got me believing that they were real. Doug passed away at a young age. He never smoked, but he died of lung cancer.
Mm-hmm.
He was also an electrician, and he did a lot of work in the shipyards, Norfolk shipyard, and I think Philadelphia, removing asbestos and electric lines out of these ships. And he got lung cancer from asbestos poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he died he was about 48 or 49 when he died. But so I did a background search, and just to verify that if I was going to write about him in the book, I didn't doubt him. I'm sure the story was true, but I just wanted backup. And contacted the Air Force, whatever office that is, and said that I'd like his military records. And I was written back to, a lady wrote back to me and said, we're sorry, but Airman Locke's records were destroyed in a warehouse fire. The records from letter so-and-so to letter so-and-so, which he was in the middle of, were all destroyed. Well, I knew that I'd heard that there had been a big warehouse Air Force fire. In fact, it's documentaries made of it on television, I believe, sure. Where a lot of these records were lost. But she said, anyway, we can't, unless you're a family member, we can't divulge but so much information. She said, so I'll send you what I have here. I'm allowed to do that. And I got it in the mail, and it was just a sheet that said that when he was inducted into the Air Force, when he left the Air Force, the timeline, which was right in that 1949 to 1953 or 48 to 52 timeline, and where he was stationed, which was Biggs Air Force Base, Fort Bliss, Texas, what unit he was in, what his grade was, and so forth. It didn't say that he was a judo instructor. It didn't go into any of the details of what his MOS was. But anyway, so I had that backup that showed that he was exactly what he said he was, mm-hmm. Except what his occupation was. So I knew that. But anyway, I think that's a telling bit of information that he gave me. He had no reason to do that. And the one thing that he never did was lie.
Yeah.
He was a straight shooter. So, and he was a good guy, a friend, and I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
So he had no reason to tell me that. He had every reason not to tell me, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's just another verification to me that Roswell was an extraterrestrial event.
Yeah.
That these and you can imagine a pilot being trained in judo would tell, even though he was told never to discuss these things, which I think they probably were, that is conceivably one type of person they would talk to.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just another piece of the Roswell puzzle.
Yeah, there's so many pieces that. Hold on, Larry. Do you care if I run to the restroom again? I've drank like 4 water bottles since we started this podcast.
No. Go, I'm fine.
All right, hey, feel free to monologue. Tell everyone where they can buy your book.
Okay. Oh yeah, he said. For all of you that are watching, here's the book, The Presidents and UFOs, Sacred History from Obama to, or from FDR to Obama. It's available on Amazon. And the foreword is by Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist and UFO researcher Stanton Friedman, who I became good friends with through the Roswell UFO Museum, which I was invited to attend as a speaker and lecturer in 2011. And Stan was always there until he passed away a year and a half ago, I guess it's been. Good friend, good to talk to. He and his associate, Kathy Martin, were there. And Kathy's also a good friend of mine. We're talking about the book and Stanton Friedman, and who wrote the foreword to the book, and what have you, and they can get it at Amazon, and bookstores, but probably they'd have to order it through a bookstore, which isn't any big deal itself.
Yeah,
Amazon works quite well.
Yeah. And I got it on Audible. It's a great listen on Audible. The
only trouble with the Audible version is they didn't have the introduction, which is disappointing because the introduction really sets the groundwork for the book.
Okay. It
goes into Robert Emenegger, who was really, I found out about, who had made the TV documentary, which I think is one of the best, UFOs past, present, and future, in the 1970s. And so I touch on that and some other things that sort of establishes the groundwork for the book. But they chose not to have the forward in there. So anyway, that's their doing.
Yeah, for everyone listening or watching. Yeah.
I held it. I have one.
Okay. Good. Do you think that? I was gonna say another thing about Roswell is, well, what I was getting to before I went to the restroom is, it kind of seems like this is kind of a weird example, but Lockheed Martin, they built one boat back in like the 90s or 2000s. It was called the Sea Shadow, and it kind of looked like the F-117 as a boat, and the radar cross section was so low that the Navy actually didn't use it, because when they do radar tests, the radar was so strong it would pick up like all the choppiness of the waves, except for where the sea shadow was. So you could actually find it in a weird, in like an ironic way. The stealth was so good that it was actually too good, because you'd see this like empty square, and it was okay. That's the sea shadow. It almost seems like
you could see the imprint in the water. You couldn't see the craft, but you could see the imprint in the water.
Yeah, so it kind of canceled itself out. It's a really cool ship, but point being is, with that, it kind of seems like that's how I see like the UFO subject. You just have to look at like the waves and all the noise of everything, and you can kind of see, you can't see the thing, but you can see the absence of it, right? You can see generals and presidents saying, I can't get access, or, you know, that's where the file ends, or was it McDonald, you know, I'm getting close, I'm on the paper trail. Like, there are all these things, and they kind of stop right there. But there's been enough from enough angles over enough decades that although none have penetrated, you can almost start to paint this thing by process of elimination. And it does seem like there is some monolithic group or committee or group of corporations or something. But there does seem to be this core that no one can get in, but it absolutely seems like, okay, well, that has to be it. That has to be UFO technology. Like, that's how I look at it, as sort of this black hole. But nonetheless, it seems like that's where it is, right? You can just find little crumbs throughout the decades. Not a lot, but little tiny crumbs. Like Truman said, UFOs, given that they exist, are not created by any power on this planet. Like, why would he say that? Why would, who was it, MacArthur? Or was it Jimmy Doolittle who said that the Foo Fighters of World War II, the little balls of light, he said that they're interplanetary craft? MacArthur said that World War III, well, not the Einstein quote, that World War III will be fought with nuclear weapons and World War IV will be sticks and stones. MacArthur said World War III will be interplanetary craft, and he set up the not a lot of people know this. MacArthur set up the Interplanetary Craft Identification Committee, I think. And that was General Douglas MacArthur. Like, these aren't no-name kooks, right? Like, it does seem to be that there's this just, I don't know, you can't see it, but it's by its absence you can see it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
MacArthur certainly made those statements, and he didn't have to, and I don't know why he would have made them if he didn't have inside knowledge. On the other hand, MacArthur, I guess, said a lot of things that that worked to his that he saw would work to his advantage. So I don't know. He certainly wasn't one of Roosevelt's favorite generals.
No. Truman fired him.
Huh?
Truman fired him.
Yeah, and Truman fired him. So I don't know. There's no question George Marshall knew a lot about them. He was the one that kept Roosevelt informed. But here again, General Marshall was the same as Eisenhower, maybe even worse as far as security matters go. And for some reason, which he never understood, Marshall just scared the hell out of his subordinates. And he really, I don't think he ever understood it, even knew that he did it, but he did.
Yeah.
He was, I think, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, I think if you look at all the great people in the 20th century, that George Marshall is at the top of my list.
Okay.
I think that his leadership. I just wonder what would happen in the Second World War if it hadn't been for George Marshall. But I think his leadership was outstanding. He certainly saved Patton's side.
Yeah.
Probably a number of times because he really loved Patton.
Yeah.
Why, I don't know, because they were two totally different individuals.
Yeah.
But in any case, let's see. What have we What have we not covered here?
So what I was gonna say is yeah, let's I got one more topic to hit on. Let's hit on that and then we'll wrap this one up. I would love to have you on a second time. It's my parents are downstairs and they said that their internet's not working, so I have to help them. So we can do this one for a little while longer, to my dismay. But yeah, do you think that, and this is pure speculation time, do you think that we found anything or saw anything on the moon during the Apollo program?
I think it's very possible.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very possible. We went back. I questioned. Back up here.
Mm-hmm.
I questioned the fact that when we got there, got on the moon, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and saw extraterrestrials, craft, and in some way we were warned off.
Yeah.
Why'd we go back? We went back, that was 11, and we went back through
17.
Why did if we had extraterrestrials telling us to get the hell off of here, why did we keep going back? Now there could be a lot more to that story. Maybe they didn't wave us off.
Yeah.
Maybe they did want us to come back.
Yeah.
Here again, it's just
sure
so much speculation in this, and so much that the government covers up.
Yeah.
But I think it's possible that we saw something. I think that we probably have photographed things on the dark side of the moon. And if there is one or more extraterrestrial bases on the moon, it would certainly be on the dark side.
Sure.
What we couldn't see it or them. I think that we've got artifacts on the moon, and I think we've seen artifacts on Mars.
Yeah, I mean, you have Buzz Aldrin saying the moon of Mars, right? Phobos.
Yeah.
There's a monolith. That's Buzz Aldrin, right? That's not a nobody.
Yeah.
He's saying we have some. I was thinking, yeah. So what if we went up on Apollo 11 and they told us we were warned off? Why would we keep going? To me, it's like, because we're humans, we're gonna keep going until they try to kill us. Like, when have we stopped doing anything?
Yeah. Well, I think we, at one point in the I guess late 40s, early 50s, our pilots were told to shoot the things down.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a death
they tried
warrant.
to.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out very well for some of those pilots.
Yeah.
They would never seen again.
Yeah. I mean, who's the Iranian pilot? Jafaris?
The general?
The Iranian...
He wasn't a general then. But...
Yeah. The guy, the Jafaris, the one who flew the F-4 Phantom in Iran, or Tehran. But yeah, I mean, there are...
He tried to launch a weapon against him.
And it locked it up.
Yeah. Took all of his instruments. He tried to fire a missile, and it just locked up.
Yeah.
Well, he turned tail and got away from there in a hurry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's... Yeah.
And you got the Mantell case.
Yeah.
I think that case was... He probably was looking at a skyhook balloon. But I don't know that for a fact. Skyhook balloons were a secret back then.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they were odd-looking things.
They were weird, yeah.
Big and flattened out when they got high altitude. So I think it conceivably could have been, back in that time, that could be what he was. Now, as far as Roswell goes, I laugh at all these film strips when they're talking about Roswell and what crashed in Roswell. And they show skyhook balloons being launched. Well, Roswell, the balloons, the weather balloons that they used, they didn't use skyhook balloons.
Yeah.
And they didn't use skyhook balloons in Project Mogul. I think they may have, toward the end of that project, they may have used a skyhook balloon or two. But typically, when Project Mogul started, it was a daisy chains of weather balloons.
Yeah.
With radio equipment attached to them.
Yeah.
And the radio equipment was pure military, had all the military numbers on it, everything. I was in the National Guard for 8 years, and I was head of the radio section that flew radio controlled aircraft targets. And I know that all the radio equipment we used back then had vacuum tubes, and all of the devices were clearly labeled U.S. Army, U.S. government, all military green. And if it had been a skyhook balloon that had crashed, to Jesse Marcel Sr., that material would have been evident. I mean, it would have been right there. If it was a skyhook balloon, it would be clear that it was radio equipment with that was attached to the daisy chain of balloons.
Yeah.
On top of that, Marcel Sr. was an amateur radio operator.
Yeah.
He was a ham.
Yeah.
And involved in...
and an MD, right? And an MD. Was it Marcel that was the MD
His
as well?
junior was an MD.
Okay.
His dad, Marcel Sr., is the one that,
crashed.
Was the head of intelligence for the 509th Bomb Group in Roswell. And he's the one that went to the crash site. So he would have recognized radio equipment from a Project Mogul immediately.
Yeah.
No question about it. So that's just, one of the many stories that come out of Roswell that just don't make any sense, that it was a mogul balloon. It wasn't a mogul balloon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's... Do you need help?
No, I need to plug in here, Tom.
Okay. Hold on.
If you gotta go.
Do you need help? No, I don't think she does right now.
You okay?
Yeah. No, we're good. I was gonna say, so what, Roswell parties, Jafar. It's the other thing.
Have
is
you locked up?
Can you hear me, Larry?
I just plugged the Ethernet
Larry?